smokes, ESPN dropped an absolute bombshell of an article that detailed everything that went down behind the scenes with Bill Belichick and the Atlanta Falcons in his pursuit of the Falcons head coaching gig, and it is filled with intense, juicy, and potentially relationship fracturing quotes and sources and nuggets and everything you can imagine, from Robert Kraft sabotaging Bill Belichick to what was going on behind the scenes with the Falcons brass and how they landed on Raheem Morris. So I want to unpack it and share it with all of you guys today. Really, really quickly, though, we are 26 subscribers away from reaching 21,000. I want to get to that before the NFL draft. So reminder to hit that sub button down below so you can stay locked in on the best Falcons news and rumors coverage on YouTube. But let's get into ESPN's report. It's from Don Van Natta, Seth Wickersham, and Jeremy Fowler, where they had multiple sources that remained off the record and protected their anonymity, but they had some things to share, let's say, with what actually went down with Bill Belichick and the Falcons and how Robert Kraft played a role in potentially Belichick not getting the Falcons head coaching gig. So we're not going to go through the entire article. It's very lengthy, but I did kind of get the spark notes for you guys. So let's start it with this. On the morning of January 25th, a few hours before the Atlanta Falcons named Raheem Morris to be their next head coach, Bill Belichick believed the job was his. Let me just interject really quickly and say, me too, Bill. That is why I thought Bill Belichick would be a Falcon. And I think at the end of this video, maybe I could get a little bit of slack for getting that one wrong, because I didn't have any sources telling me that Belichick was a Falcon, but I was reading the tea leaves and I too was blindsided. But oh well. Moving on here. He assured blank that he wasn't... Okay, so now I can actually back up a little bit. This is on Bill Belichick talking about whether or not he wants total control. And he says, he assured blank that he wasn't seeking the total control he had for most of his 24 seasons in New England. He pledged to work with the team's existing group of decision-makers, including general manager Terry Fontenot. Belichick also knew that Arthur Blank had checked his references with a group that included Patriots owner Robert Kraft and his son, Jonathan Kraft. This was the only potential hiccup. Would Belichick want control, roster personnel, and decision-making powers, or was he willing to have a GM above him like Terry Fontenot that would put the team together and it would be Belichick's job to coach whatever roster he was given? Based off of what this report says, and again, these are just, allegations and he said, she said, nothing's a confirmed fact, but we got some really bright minds at Bristol putting together this report here. So I'm inclined to believe a good chunk of this is probably true. Based on what they're saying, Belichick was not seeking that total control. He just wanted to coach. All right, more on this. Whenever he was asked about Belichick's failed candidacy prior to the Super Bowl in Las Vegas, Arthur Blank always spoke respectfully about the coach with nearly a half-century of experience. A living legend, Arthur Blank called him. What Arthur Blank didn't say was that he and his top lieutenants had voted on the team's next head coach, ranking each candidate. Bill Belichick didn't even finish in anyone's top three. Now, we have more on that last nugget right there to circle back to later on in the video, but let me just pause for a moment and say, this is a little bit of a red flag to me. I know things did not end gracefully for Belichick in Foxborough, but don't you think a six-time Super Bowl winning head coach should get in the top three of people's rankings? Like, shouldn't that be a little bit of a wake-up call and maybe something in 5-6 years we look back at and go, ooh, that was a big miss by Atlanta. Didn't even crack the top three? That just seems like something that alarm bells should be going off for. Now, as for the rankings, here's what they looked like. Raheem Morris was number 1. Mike Macdonald, the former Ravens, now Seattle Seahawks head coach, was number 2. And then Texans' former and still current offensive coordinator Bobby Slowik, who came in for an interview the day they hired Raheem Morris. It went 90 minutes past the original scheduled time. They were that impressed by Bobby Slowik. He came in at number 3. So If you want to know who finished runner-up, it wasn't Bill. It was someone I didn't expect to be second on the list, and that was former Ravens DC and now Seahawks head coach Macdonald. Now, there's no denying that post-Tom Brady in New England was not graceful for Belichick and the Pats, right? 29-39 record. The final season for Belichick in New England, 4-13. One playoff appearance where the Bills just absolutely curb-stomped New England. The Mac Jones failure, and a lot of really bad draft picks. It's not just Mac Jones missing, but even Mac Jones, I think, is coming out of this relationship looking better than Bill because they had Matt Patricia working with him at some points. Like, that was a failure on the Patriots coaching staff, and Mac Jones certainly didn't help his own cause. He had a fair share of mistakes that were solely on him, but I don't think he had the greatest system around him to make him successful. So there were a lot of issues. There's no denying that Belichick, after Tom Brady left, was just not running the same operation he was with Tom Brady. All right, let's get back to the article. And in the pair of interviews with Blank and Falcons executives, sources said Belichick pledged his willingness to coexist with Falcons executives under this new paradigm. In fact, he insisted he just wants to coach. But the Falcons realized that if you hire Bill Belichick, you hire all of him, an entire philosophy, an ethos stemming from one man's ethic and ingenuity, sources said. In the end, his assurances failed to persuade Arthur Blank and team executives. Quote, he was essentially voted off the island, a source close to the Falcons' hiring process said. I do buy that Arthur Blank may have sat down in these interviews and said, listen, I'm not here to take over Terry Fontenot's job. I'm not here to have complete and final say on every draft pick and free agent signing. I just want to coach. And I'm sure that was what Bill Belichick said because he kind of knew that he didn't have the ground to stand on to demand that type of power based on the last few years in New England. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons brass goes, we know you're saying that, but we know when April rolls around and we're in the war room and we're split between two players, Fontenot's guy and Bill Belichick's guy, who do you think is going to get their way? I'm going to think Bill Belichick is going to probably text in the pick number and who they want to go to before Fontenot even has a chance to pick up the phone. All right, let's get back to the article now. In a lengthy interview with Blank, Belichick showed no rust, sources said. Arthur Blank told colleagues that he was very impressed. Quote, I think Blank came away from the boat thinking, this is my guy. A source close to Belichick said, though from his vantage point, any momentum following that meeting seemed to die over the next week. A second meeting was planned with team CEO Rich McKay and other Falcons executives. This right here is the beginning of the end for ATL Bill because Belichick flew down to Arthur Blank's private yacht in the Caribbean, and Arthur Blank, I'm sure, was wined and dined and impressed by what Belichick could offer. I mean, he's a 6-time Super Bowl winning head coach, and he won some as a DC before that. Like, who wouldn't be blown away with, hey, Bill, tell me your plan to turn my team around. We've had 3 winning seasons in the last decade plus. And I bet Belichick had a pretty good response to that question. But when Rich McKay and other executives entered the fold, that is when things went downhill, right? It's kind of like if you're impressing a girl, she really likes you, and then you get to meet her friends. And you don't have to just impress one girl. You have to impress the whole lot. And not always do you find success with impressing the friends. And ultimately, they have a lot of influence on the girl's decision. So that's my Colin Cowherd analogy for the video. And before we get to the rest of this article, I do have to tell you guys really quickly about our sponsor today, which is Prize Picks. The #1 daily fantasy sports platform in North America has an awesome deal for the Dirty Birds, where all you've got to do is download the Prize Picks app and use code CLNS to get a deposit match up to $100. Now, I should probably say what Prize Picks is, and that is the #1 daily fantasy sports platform where all you have to do is choose 2 to 6 players and then pick more or less on their projected stats. So these are my 2024 NFL season-long stat projections I'm rolling with taking the more on Kirk Cousins' passing yards for the Falcons at a hair over 4,000 yards. Also going to take the less on Jalen Hurts' passing yards, but I do like the more on Saquon Barkley's rushing yards. Eagles signed Barkley for a reason. I expect him to get a lot of touches. So if you like my selections, download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. I put that link in the comments and description of today's video. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Back to the article. Quote, in a conversation with Blank, Kraft delivered a stark assessment of Belichick's character, according to a source who spoke to two people, a close Robert Kraft friend and a longtime Bill Belichick confidant. The source quoted the Belichick source as saying, Robert called Arthur Blank to warn him to not trust Bill. The account was backed up, the source said, by the close Robert Kraft friend. Multiple sources said that Robert Kraft spoke with some candor to Arthur Blank about Bill Belichick, though the sources declined to elaborate. One source close to Bill Belichick said Robert Kraft, quote, was a big part of why the Falcons passed on hiring him. So we have Robert Kraft maybe meddling a little bit here. Again, these are all sources and nothing's a proven fact, but if this is true, it makes me wonder one of two things. Is Robert Kraft being a little bit of a jealous ex? Where sure, he may have been the one that ended the relationship, but he still doesn't want to see Bill Belichick go have success elsewhere. And that's true throughout all of humanity, right? If you break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, you don't want to see them rebound that quickly the next week, even if you were the one that ended the relationship. So if you're Robert Kraft, you could be a little bit jealous here and think, man, if Tom Brady, who left and win a Super Bowl with the Bucs, and Belichick, who I basically fired, goes win a Super Bowl with the Falcons, who are they going to look back at as the master genius in New England for that dominant run? Not going to be me so much. I'm the guy that got rid of two guys that went on to have the ultimate success and the ultimate summit with other teams. So I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't put it past Robert Kraft to maybe smear Belichick's name a little bit because he doesn't want to see Bill go have success with another team. Or could it just be an honest opinion? It's been reported that Robert Kraft and Arthur Blank are very close friends, and they're probably the closest ownership friendship there is out there. And maybe this is Robert Kraft just doing his friend Arthur Blank a big-time favor in giving him his honest assessment of his former head coach. And if that's true, then I don't think it's anything damaging. This is just a reference, and you don't always get great references. Now, the Patriots, by the way, have denied that Robert Kraft said anything to this tune. Robert Kraft specifically did not comment for this article, but a Patriots spokesperson did say, no, Robert Kraft had never said any of this stuff here. Now, maybe before the January interviews, Kraft gave Arthur Blank some honest opinions on Bill Belichick, and it's no public secret that at times Kraft has been critical of Bill Belichick, saying he can be a bit arrogant. But when you're winning a lot of Super Bowls, I think ownership can put up with that. All right, more on this now. 4 days after huddling on the yacht, Belichick was interviewed for a second time on January 19th at Arthur Blank's Atlanta area home. Blank and top Falcons executives, including Rich McKay and Terry Fontenot, and team president Greg Beadles were present. The executives, whose team has had just 3 winning seasons since 2012, took the measure of a coach who is used to doing it his own way. By the time the meeting was over, Bill Belichick felt confident it had gone well, a source close to him said. But a source familiar with the Falcons' thinking said neither Rich McKay nor Terry Fontenot wanted to work with Belichick. Their concerns mirrored those of the Eagles. If you hire Belichick, he will inevitably run the team, even if he doesn't demand total control. So the question now becomes, Terry Fontenot and Rich McKay, were they looking out for themselves, or were they putting the team's best interest below their own personal interests. Because if I'm Terry Fontenot and you're on the hiring committee for a guy who might replace your job duties, what do you think you're going to say about that candidate? We should definitely hire the guy that's going to strip what I do and my day-to-day responsibilities down by half. My guess is Fontenot probably wasn't thinking, what's going to give the most amount of wins for this team next year? More so, what's best for me? And that's just my 2 cents as, what would I do if I was Terry Fontenot? Have my own best interest in mind or do what's best for the fan base? I would hope that you'd pick the fan base. But maybe Fontenot and McKay were sitting there thinking, we got to get Arthur off of this guy because the writing is on the wall. When Belichick gets here, everything he said in the interviews, they're going to be lies. He's going to want control. He is going to remove us from having our say in personnel decisions and big important decision making. I could see how those two landed at that spot. Another issue that was raised about hiring Bill Belichick was he's 15 wins away from either tying or passing Don Shula's all-time wins record. And some fear that after 2 seasons, if Belichick went 8 wins, 9 wins, whatever, he would have his 15-plus wins, and then he would retire. Whether or not he got Atlanta to the promised land, he would come in here, completely terrorize everything, like strip it down, try to make it the Patriot way in 2 seasons, bring his staff in, Josh McDaniels, Matt Patricia, out with the old, in with the new. He goes 8-9, 9-8, and then he goes deuces, and I left this place a dumpster fire. That could be an issue. My final thoughts on the entire article, and I invite you to go read it. It was very insightful. It was very interesting, and I definitely learned a lot, but I can't say anything is a proven fact from that article is there were pros and cons to Bill Belichick. He won a lot of Soupies. That's a big pro. He had not done a whole lot recently, and it's a what have you done for me lately type of league. He was older and didn't really know how much gas he'd have left in the tank, so Arthur Blank, who doesn't like doing head coaching searches, he tends to give coaches an extra year or two. Would he want to be looking for a new head coach in 2 to 3 years? Most likely not, but if he felt like Belichick could get them a Soupy in that 2 to 3 year time span, then sure, why not? But I want to know the people that were influencing Arthur Blank. Terry Fontenot, Rich McKay, Greg Beadles. I mean, Arthur Blank is known for wanting to have a family in his front office. Not Les Miles' family, but an actual, or a Brian Kelly family, but an actual family. Do those influencers have their own best interest in mind or the fan base and team's best interest in mind? Do they want to go with Bill Belichick knowing that he'd probably come in here and shake things up a little bit and they wouldn't like that? Or do they want to play it safe with a Raheem Morris who would collaborate? I mean, that's exactly what Raheem Morris said in his press conference. He wants a relationship like Sean McVay and Les Snead have in L.A. where the two work hand in hand in tandem. That's something Terry Fontenot would love to have. I'm guessing Fontenot wasn't advocating for the candidate that would reduce his role. Even if Belichick said that wouldn't be the case, you're Fontenot, do you take his word? It's risky. But I'm sure the fan base would prefer to pick the candidate that would get them the most amount of wins. Even if that means a blow to some people's egos in Flowery Branch. This is not about Fontenot's ego. It's about getting wins. And that's where I'm concerned. Was the decision-making process completely influenced and tainted because of what Belichick could become? Possibly. Now, let me ask you this question before I let you on out of here. Do you have any regret over picking Raheem Morris over Bill Belichick? I'm like my sports mindset is always like, when a decision's been made, I kind of want to rally around that decision and root for success and be optimistic and whatnot. So I'm behind Raheem Morris, but if you had the opportunity to go back in time and change things, would you want to see that happen or not? All right, that will do it for us on today's show. I appreciate everyone for sticking around for a bit of a unique Falcons today. I'll sign off, though, and see you guys tomorrow.